Okay, so in construction of the demand curve, according to the law of demand, we have assumed that other factors which is influencing the demand for a commodity is kept constant or is considered as same, and it does not change during that particular period. So what if there is a change in other factors such as taste and preference of a consumer, income of the consumer, and then changes in the price of a related goods or substitute goods? Then what will happen? So we will see a situation of shift of a demand curve. A shift in demand curve can be of two types, that is extension of demand curve and then contraction of demand curve. So we shall see in detail movement along a demand curve and also shift in the demand curve. So movement along the demand curve is represented in this figure 2. So movement along the demand curve would mean that due to the changes in prices, a consumer will change the quantity demanded for that commodity. If the price falls, then his quantity demanded will also increases, which means you are moving downwards towards the demand curve. And if your price of the commodity increases, then quantity demanded will fall, which means you are moving upwards towards the demand curve. So which is because of the price decline and the price increasing, you are moving up and down along the demand curve, which is the movement just along the demand curve, and there is no shift taking place. So movement along the demand curve is due to the law of demand, because price falls and then your quantity demanded increases, and if the prices of commodity falls, then your quantity demanded will increase, and vice versa. That is the case of movement along the demand curve. So what happens when other factors such as taste, preference, income changes? Then there will be a shift in the demand curve, as we have mentioned. So we shall see the case of a extension of the demand curve. Here, this is the graphical representation of a shift or extension of the demand curve. Let us take an example. For instance, the income of the consumer increases, say due to the hike in their wages and salaries, or due to the grant of, age, dearness allowance, they will demand more of a good. So when their income increases, they will demand more of the goods, say cloth at its prices. So this will cause a shift in the demand curve. We will see the shift in the demand curve when a consumer income increases. So it is shifting rightward towards the right, as shown in this figure 3. So DD is the demand curve. So DD is the previous demand curve. So with the increase in the income, the demand curve shifts right to D dash D dash, which implies that at each price, such as P1, P2, P3, the consumers demand more of the commodity. Previously at DD demand curve, at P1, the consumer is demanding only at this point. And at P2 demanding only at Q2. And at P3, the consumer is demanding only at Q3 quantity. Once the income increases, demand has shifted to D dash D dash from DD. So at the same price as P1, a consumer will be able to buy more of that commodity. So his quantity demanded can be increased with the same price because his income has increased. So it is shifting. So this much amount can be demanded by the same price. Price has not fallen here. Just that the income of a commodity, income of the consumer has increased. further at P2 also, earlier it was demanding only at this point. Now it is able to demand at this point here quantity. At P3 also, earlier it was demanding only at Q3, but now it is capable of demanding up to this much amount of quantity. So because of the shift in the demand curve, and demand curve shifts happens because of the increase in income of a consumer, now a consumer can demand more of a quantity at the same price level. That is the extension of demand curve. Rightward shift of the demand curve. Just opposite to that is the contraction of demand. So when we talk about contraction of demand, what do we see here? This figure 4 will show you the contraction in demand, the decrease in demand, or the leftward shift of the demand curve from DD to D dash dash D dash dash demand curve. So, for example, if due to the inadequate rainfall, the agricultural products has, declined, and then, which causes the fall in the incomes of the farmers, which will cause a decrease in the demand. If the income falls, then there will be decrease in demand for industrial products, let us say cloth. So this will result in shift in the demand curve to the left. Here it is shifting towards the left, not towards the right, due to the decrease in income. Why decrease in income? Because of agricultural produce has fallen due to the inadequate rainfall. So income of the farmers decreases, which will lead to decrease in the demand for agricultural products such as cloth. Because of that, your demand curve has shifted leftwards to D dash dash D dash dash from DD curve. So figure 4 indicates that demand curve shifts to the left, and at its price the farmers demand less of cloth than before. So earlier it was demanding Q1 quantity of good at P1, but now after this leftward shifts at P1 price, at same price, the consumer is able to get only this much. Quantity demanded has decreased. And again, same with P2 prices. Earlier it was demanding Q2 amount of goods, but with the shift in demand curve, he is able to demand only at Q3 here. So at the same given price level, a consumer is able to demand very less comparing with the previous demand curve. That is called the contraction of the demand curve due to the fall in income. That is the leftward shift of the demand curve from DD to D dash dash D dash dash. And again, shift of the demand curve can take place not only because of increase in the income of consumer, but also it can change because of the preference of the people for a commodity. For example, color TV. So people are beginning to prefer TV color than black and white TV. So the demand for color TV will increase because preference of the people has changed from black and white TV to color TV. So in that case also, there will be a rightward shift of the demand curve. And again, if the expectations about future price of the commodity is likely to increase, then the demand for that particular good at present will increase. So that case also, there will be a rightward shift of the demand curve. And again, if the price of a related commodities changes, then your demand curve will also shift rightward. In a case, for example, let's take an example of coffee and tea. So if price of coffee rises, the other factors remaining constant, this will cause a demand for tea. If your price for coffee increases, your demand for tea will increases. So Because of this change in relative or substitute goods, your demand for the other good increases. In that case also the same situation will happen. There will be shift in demand curve for tea because the price of a coffee has increased. So these are all the cases in which we will see the shift in the demand curve.